I am very excited to introduce the moderator for our next panel. I was blessed about a little over a decade ago when I was the editor of the Washington Times to count her among our columnists. She's a best-selling author, a great radio show host. You see her on Fox News. I believe she's one of the most important conservative thought leaders of our generation. She's my good friend Tammy Bruce, and what I love about Tammy is her conversion to conservatism is so important. She started, like Barack Obama, as a community organizer on the left, right, and she evolved into one of the most cogent voices in conservative America today. We're going to have a great conversation, and I know she's suited for this, the next generation of activism in America. I'm going to turn it over to Tammy Bruce.
All righty. Hi, everybody. How are you? This is great. It's like I can see through the television and see all of you. It's a fabulous thing. You guys are terrific. Yeah, if we could take seats, if you're inclined, that would be great. We've got about 30 minutes here. And you're here, and that separates you out already from the average American. You care about the country. You came to this place. I think you spent some cash. You care about what the end result of this election is, about what's happening to our country. And so you're doing more than necessarily sitting at home and wringing your hands. You're in motion. You're in this room. And let me just tell you, as I introduce our panel here, every worldwide movement and revolution that has occurred has been designed and has occurred in a room with maybe about a dozen people. A dozen people. And now look at this room. I think we're in a good position. And now, as we talk about the next generation of activism, it could be about activism itself, and I'm clearly the mom here on the panel. But let me introduce you. You've already seen, and you know everybody here, but right next to me is Matt Kane. He's a podcast host and writer for AMAC, so you've seen his work. Paul Ingrassia, the Italians have to be everywhere, so here he is. Attorney and commentator. And Vish Burra, is that right? There we go. You know, it's a very, very romantic kind of title. He's an operative. He's a conservative operative. We need those, don't we? But he is also the executive secretary of the New York Young Republican Club. All right. So it's going to be we can have some crosstalk. It's going to be kind of an open conversation. When my activism began on the left, we had beepers. We had, I was sending out messages about where to go and do activism and what we were doing based on a phone machine in a closet that people would call and get a message from the tape. You remember those things? Right? You remember still, when I think about a beeper, I still shudder. I can still feel the vibration, and it's a horrible thing. And now we've got a world that is filled with technology that affects us in good ways and bad ways. But your sense as a young person, especially with the transition that Donald Trump has allowed us to make here about getting people involved. Matt, tell me about your experience and what it's meant for you as a young man.
Well, I think when President Trump announced he was running about 10 years ago almost now, politics was sort of for older people, not really for the young generation, had a lot to do with money, and people always spoke in terms that were sort of hard to digest. And when President Trump got involved, his first introduction speech, he got right to the point about the problems that we were having, and he sort of changed the view of politics even for young people. It was sort of hard to turn off the television, and now 10 years later, you could see how much enthusiasm there is, and I really credit that to him for a large part, because if you look at the rest of the party, people are sort of following his lead, but there's still nobody who commands the audience and the attention like he does. So he really, I credit him for a lot of the activism we're seeing now, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. But it's sort of hard to ignore what he's done, and I credit him for a lot of the enthusiasm you're seeing right now.
And on that note, this is, I think part of it is, you might agree, Paul, that he doesn't come from politics. He comes from the American sensibility about what's right and what's wrong, and that we have to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Donald Trump is, and this remains true today, even 9 years after he descended that famous escalator at Trump Tower, he's not a politician. He's not really a political figure. He does not come from the world of politics. He does not speak the language of a politician. He was a builder. He was an entrepreneur. He was a cultural figure more than a political figure. And I think, the way that the media landscape has changed over the last 10 years with the opening of Twitter, with the advent of networks like Real America's Voice and Rumble and all these other networks that have come to be, kind of challenging the legacy media institutions, that was in large part because of him and his tweeting. He was the man who tweeted himself in many ways back in 2016 to the Oval Office. And he was one man who was able to kind of breach the barrier, the divide between politics and culture in a way that no one else could and no one else has been able to since he's entered politics, or national politics. And for that reason, he's the type of guy where you don't need to, we're talking about this backstage, how Kamala Harris is bringing out Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and she needs all the celebrities to prop her up. Actually, we've kind of seen the death of the celebrity as sort of this national figure over the last 10 years. Their influence has definitely decreased, which is a good thing in our politics. And a lot of that is because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has really diffused that bubble, so to speak. And you don't need all these fancy celebrities, although now so many of them are coming over to his corner. You lose track of it.
We'll take some fancy celebrities, but we've got someone coming up, and we love them. I think everybody has a right to participate and to be passionate, but I still think that Trump is our Beyonce. Vish, now at the same time, it's one thing to be a conservative activist and to be a conservative. You're involved in, like, you've got the R next to your name, and you're in New York, and that's pretty exciting. What is it that makes that important when it comes to your generation and being a Republican and activism and working in politics in that way?
Well,
This mic is rigged. Actually, I think that one of the things, being an R from New York, I think really for us, especially the work we've done at the New York Young Republican Club, was to just kind of be fun and sexy. That was really the first intent, especially when we're young. We want to make the barrier of entry easy. If we want to be a big tent party, we want to invite new people who don't know, who are young, who might not be aware fully of what their political acclamations are or what their political instincts are, and want to find out more. We wanted to make that easy. And so the very first thing we did was just kind of be fun, have events, throw parties, and share what we're doing everywhere so that everyone can see, hey, this is the group that you're going to be a part of if you join us, right? That was the point. And if you even look today, right, you look at a video or a shot of 1,000 Hamas protesters in the street, what does that look like? And do you really want to be a part of that, right? And then you see something like our gala that we do every year, where President Trump was last year, and you see 1,000 well-dressed conservatives like Matt Kane here and Paul Ingrassia and their beautiful bow ties, hanging out with President Trump, and beautiful women everywhere. And if that's what you see, there are a lot of people who are going to want to be a part of that, especially young people. And that's the boldness that young people want to see, because I think that's what's lacking today, are bold leaders amongst the young generation. And the more they see that, the more young people will be drawn to that and come in.
I think that the college situation, the university, the indoctrination dynamic through education, it really trains young people to think that success is bad, right? That having money or being an entrepreneur is evil somehow, that taking a shower is wrong. When we see these, self-care, genuine self-care, it goes down to the nature of the depression that occurs in these environments, right? When you're told that everything is victimhood, nothing, you can hope for nothing, that you've got to band together with people because of victimhood, because they're out to get you. Of course that's going to lead to retreat, to fear, and to all of that. so in a way, Matt, we've got to overcome this mentality of, and it's fragile, of what young people have been indoctrinated into believing, that dressing in a suit is passé, or that having some success, that you don't want to be seen with those people. I believe it's fragile. What do you think when it comes to your people?
Well, I went to
His
school.
people.
When I went away to school, my first year of college was the 2016 election. So I saw it firsthand. Obviously, universities are pretty liberal as it is. But I mean, leading up to election day, they were all so confident, all the liberals in my classes, and they were thrilled. They were happier than I've ever seen anybody in my life leading up to it. And the next day, there was class cancellations, safe space closets. It was pretty wild. Of course, I was not a part of that, but they were pretty crowded. And it was really wild to see how you could go from being so sure of yourself, so sure that things were going to go your way, to then being in a state of mental panic.
See, isn't that part of the lesson, Paul, that we have to go through this to see who's been lying to you, and see that there's an option, that there is an alternative, that maybe the guys in the suits are great and fun and it's interesting and things could be better?
Well, I think that's true. There's a cultural and an economic side to it, especially here in New York, where college tuition is really through the roof. As a graduate of Fordham University and Cornell Law School, tuition now is over, close to $100,000.
Yeah.
So as a young person, to be going into those schools and then to be told, especially if you're a male or a straight white male or a Christian or a conservative or a Trump supporter, that after paying all that tuition, after taking on all that debt, you can't have a job. You can't work in a corporate America because you're not filling the DEI quota. And then to get this counter messaging, their side, with Tim Walz, giving tampons for high school boys and saying this is the example of how masculinity should be in America, and this is the type of person that you have to be, and you have to be totally on drugs and off the circuit, and you can't speak your voice. I mean, what sort of normal male, or really any young person, will gravitate to that message? I mean, our side is the side of the American dream, embodied by Donald Trump, a billionaire, successful businessman. He didn't need to go into politics. He's not like a parasite who depends on the system. He's someone who built his own wealth up independently, and he's a creative mind. He could think for himself, as opposed to the left, which is a bunch of, as they call them, NPCs, people who don't have their own mind. They're like hive mind type people. They follow the lead of, whatever messaging they're getting from the fake news.
We saw that with the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. After October 7th, we're coming up to a year on the attack on Israel, a year. And we saw that with interviews of people at the colleges who were protesting, asking them if they knew what from the river to the sea meant, which was the annihilation of the Jewish people. And it goes to that it's doing it because others are doing it. They don't know why they're doing it. And as a Republican representative, if you will, someone who has got to organize because of where you live deliberately, is it something that really, if they're looking for an alternative, or is it pointing it out to them that they've been lied to, in addition to having, look, Trump is appealing because he is a nonconformist, right? He challenges the status quo. That's what we've all wanted to do at some point, especially in our college lives. Wouldn't it be better to know and be able to embrace what you're standing up for versus being embarrassed because you have no idea what it is you're talking about?
Well, I think it speaks to, what young people really want for, a very long time, especially as they're coming up, which is a sense of belonging. And if everybody they're going to class with is, going out to these protests and they don't quite understand the issue, but my friend group is attending this thing, or this girl I have a crush on is attending this thing. The need is more natural, and it's more it's a lower sense of consciousness, especially as a young person. When they're doing that and they're seeking it out, and it's also good because even when they do that, they participate in things. They go and see these things for themselves. They eventually find out that they've been lied to, that some of these things don't make sense, and then they start seeking out alternatives. And especially, again, as young people, they go to college, to learn X, Y, and Z so that they can make their space in the world. And then when they realize that not only are these beliefs not furthering them in that venture, eventually they're going to realize that what they've been taught has been a lie, and they're going to go look for other young people who have maybe done it better. And that's why we try to serve as that example, so that we are that
Right.
signal, that lighthouse, that beacon when they come to that conclusion.
The examples, as I look across the room, some of you will have children, some of you will have grandchildren, some of you are the ones in college dealing with friends. How many of you have conflict in your family with young people because of what it is they've been fed, especially on social media, at college, right? So it's, there are many, many stories, Matt, about parents intervening at schools, and even where you send your daughter off to college and she comes back a different person. And how do you interfere with that? What advice would you give to the parents and the grandparents in this room about how to engage with the young people in their lives?
Well, I feel a little funny giving anyone in here parental advice, but I would say it probably starts at home. I grew up in a conservative household, so for me, by the time I got to college, I already had sort of my own set of values that I wasn't going to be too swayed off from. So I think if at home, one of the things I hate is when people say, don't talk politics with family or don't bring it up. When you don't do that, then you let other people sort of decide what you're going to talk about.
Great point.
So what I would say is talk about those things. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I mean, it's kitchen table conversation. I think when you just have honest conversation amongst your family, that's really where you sort of gain a foundation. And again, you don't have to be closed-minded to everything that you hear, but having a foundation is good that you don't really sway too far off of. And by the time your kids go to school, I mean, there's no reasons for why they have to come back considering whether they're a different gender or, whether they have to change the way they think about everything. Sort of just building confidence to know what is fine and to, build off that and not let people sway.
I think it is about the constant communication, that you are not living on a different planet or living different lives, that your responsibility as a parent or a grandparent continues. And that sometimes in life things have been difficult, right, in having difficult conversations. But I think also, Vish, that there is, and for the families out there, it's one thing to grow up in a conservative household. And a lot of you know my background. So I was the president of the National Organization for Women. I'm a gay woman. I am older than everyone else here on the panel. It took several steps, but what it was and what you've mentioned is seeing how I was lied to helped me in my transformation of understanding, and then going to work on talk radio. I was lied to about who conservatives were. I was lied to about Rush Limbaugh. I was lied to about average, regular conservatives and Christians in particular. So as a young man of color, that's got to be a factor as well when it comes to, you are being lied to about what conservatism means, who fits, what we can do as individuals. In fact, that it's better for minorities because it has more respect for the individual and is rejecting the idea that victimhood is automatic and natural.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I definitely want to mention is that time makes more converts than reason in a lot of ways. When people give people the time to see these things, let it develop in front of them naturally, organically, and have some faith that these people will make logical decisions about their own lives, about their own views. But speaking to the sort of the color issue, as a young Indian man, I didn't really grow up in a conservative household per se. Everyone I went to school with, everyone I grew up with in New York City, everyone's a liberal. So I had to have my own learning experience with that. But one thing I noticed was, obviously in every school, you'll be taught about slavery and you'll be taught about Jim Crow and all this stuff. And they come to, an example like the water fountain. If you are black, you're not allowed to drink at this water fountain. Those were one of the rules back in the day. But now, if you think about it, they say, well, if you're black, you shouldn't be reading this. If you're black, you shouldn't be listening to this person. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't black, right? So this is I've described this before, but the best way to think about it is they've went from physical chains to metaphysical chains, right? It's now, if they can't control the physical things you do, then they're gonna just go ahead, control your mind, control what you should be doing, and telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing. That's where that new fight is today.
That is exactly the point. And when we think about the new generation of activism, we all might have some examples. I always think about Scott Pressler, who's out there doing the registrations. Now, that can be a boring issue, but not if you're an interesting person, right? Not if you're doing that thing and you've got a mission you need to accomplish. But I think that the arguments about what appeals to all young people, and I think human beings, is this idea that we are our own people. Young people, I hear from young people all the time talking about, well, I'm a nonconformist and I'm not going to be what you want me to be. And I said, but you're exactly like everyone else in your class. The real nonconforming position is to be a Republican in your college. You want to not conform? Do that, right? And so I think that when we think about activism, right, there's books to recommend. There's the simplest idea that sparks the nature of saving a young person, but also making them realize that their future is at stake, that communism destroys lives, that the demand to conform destroys your lives. Is there anything that, as a writer, that you think parents and others should be reading, or any kind of activism that you've seen out there now that is a template and that can be exciting for people to look at when it comes to the younger generation?
Well, there's a lot of great ones, so it's hard to pinpoint one, but I would say there's certain things which maybe it's more important to avoid, which I would say, I know you're on Fox, but most mainstream news, I would probably recommend not tuning into too much, not yours, of course. But if you know where to avoid and where the slants are, I would say it's probably good to know what to not consume and sort of go to places where it's more objective and places where you could really...
I would argue, though, that it's important to see what everyone is saying, what everyone is putting out there. It's to see what the indoctrination is, and sometimes you're going to get a nugget of some truth as well when it comes to the choices we make to become an active person. For your generation, for Paul, you're a lawyer, you're accomplished, etc. But what do you say to people who think that that's passé now?
Hearing the other side is so important, and really in-person communication, dialogue with other people who disagree with you, more than just like watching MSNBC for 10 minutes a day to see what they're saying. Having those conversations in person is the most impactful in terms of changing and convincing people, and especially now among young people who are glued to their phones all day long. I think the amount of social isolation as a result of COVID and so many other factors in play have made this generation, Zoomers and people younger than all three of us, the most socially isolated generation in American history. So that really goes a long way, going in person, having the conversation, and not being hostile. I mean, there's always so much, Twitter has opened up, everyone's fighting each other all the time, nonstop. Just having a normal, level-headed conversation with someone, really, especially a young person who may be impressionable, whether you're an older person or whether you're a friend and someone who's conservative, Republican.
We've been told that it might be offensive, so we tend to not want to do that, right? That's a signal for us to retreat, even from our own families. Don't say something, because offending someone now apparently is the worst thing in the world you can do. How many of you have family members, have young people who are doing fine in the midst of all of this? Yeah, great. I think more hands than who are having problems. So that's good news, but in touching back to your point, Vish, is the issue of social media. Great for organizing, great for people to see like Trump videos, which he's on TikTok now, which they would normally not see, being able to adapt into that framework. So they say, well, you should take the social media away from kids, which I agree with, but not young adults or even teenagers, but it should be at least monitored. What is your sense of the social media?
Well, I think that the proper way to use social media in a way that's the most effective, and I think honestly the most respectable way to use it, is that social media has always, or should be viewed as something that amplifies what you're doing in real life, right? And so, and it shouldn't be that is the world, the social media world is the world in which you operate itself. that is, I think, the difference, right? That people will use social media for the sake of using social media and getting more outrageous to grab more attention on social media. I think that has created its own kind of monsters, but the right way, the more respectable way that I found that social media, again, should be used, and when these people do it this way, they're more respected or more liked, is just amplifying the things that they're doing in real life. That's why Donald Trump works on TikTok. You're just taking a guy who's already done great in all sorts of mass communication formats, and you're just amplifying it on a new channel, right? And so that is I think, again, a model that works. I've always tried to do the work first, and then I amplify that on social media. Then it's real, and then we take it virtual. I think that a lot of people today are just, clout for clout's sake is kind of what's going on right now, and
Hiding in it.
yeah,
Slipping into it and hiding in it. And that takes us, though, to a good point about doing the work and the 4 minutes we have left. Donald Trump also changed the scene by doing rallies. We talk about real people, real life, the nature of what's going on, exciting performance. We are a system and a country and media that is based on performance. So whatever you'd want to leave with is the final word, but the notion of how people are reacting to Trump, young people especially, I think part of that environment adds into that. And the arguments now that it seems like the left is the man, is the system, is the boss. That's who the left has turned into, is everybody that we've all, as Americans, have been fighting against all this time.
Yeah, and I think the most amazing thing right now is everyone's under the same impression that the last 4 years have been very tough for everybody. And what's amazing is if you have the chance to go to a Trump rally, which I'm sure many of you here will be on Wednesday in Uniondale, right? So whether it's a rally, whether it's a big rally or just somewhere he's speaking, there's a certain energy that he brings, and it's sort of fascinating to witness because outside of whatever arena he's in, there's a lot of darkness, but when he's speaking, you sort of leave there with a sense of hope, which I think is very important right now. He could have left after 2020 and decided that was enough and no one really would have blamed him. But instead, he keeps doing these events. Yeah, I think most would have, honestly. So instead, you go there, and if you have the chance to physically be there, it's great to watch them on television. But there's something about being there. There's a certain energy. It's, as you mentioned, a concert or a sporting event that's really uplifting, especially right now. And I think that goes a long way.
I agree with everything Matt said. These Trump rallies are, we also have to remember just how historic they are, and we have to hold on to that because, we have 6, 7 weeks left until Election Day, and we might not have something like this again in our lifetime. So we have to appreciate it also as a historic event. But the optics and his way of just speaking off the cuff and relating to voters is something that, as someone who's been to so many Trump rallies myself, every single time it's always a new thing for me, and it's always a brilliant thing to see him in person. Also, I'll be covering the Trump rally in Uniondale for RSBN, so be sure to stop by and we'll do an interview if you want to come over. We're excited for this very much.
Yeah, I think that with all the persecution and all the pressure and pain that the media has applied on not just Trump but his supporters, on the MAGA movement, this sort of new wave of politics that's popped up on our side. With all of that, the media has made us a counterculture, essentially. Yeah, and so what the Trump rally does, I think, is it gives us visual social proof that we're not alone. And that was always the point. Always the point, and to draw out more people like us, to give us a place to go to. And so, let us embrace being the counterculture. If we may have kids, or you may have kids that end up at a certain conclusion, but not the way you thought they would. And that is something that we need to kind of grow and foster, because that is the new way we're going to be able to reach this young generation. And we should be really glad that they do have a place to walk to at the end when they've gone through their transformation. That was the Trump rally for me.
That's it. Well, thank you all very much. The beginning of the transformation. I want to thank all of you. That is it for our panel. I will be back a little bit later on because I like to pontificate. So you'll have about 15 more minutes with me. And we got a lot more coming up. John Solomon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.